Gungahlin Community Council presentation? Yeah, beautiful. Good evening. My apologies for the slightly tardy start. My name is, as I said before, Peter Elford, the President of the Gungahlin Community Council. We have quite a full agenda tonight. We've got 4 speakers, although I am assured by at least one of the speakers they won't need their full half hour, so hopefully we'll be all done by 8:30. As you probably know, we've had a bit of a campaign over the last few months around planning and the emergence of a whole bunch of the high-rise buildings. We've got a couple of talks on that today, and our lead-off talk is from the Environment, Planning and Sustainable Development Directorate, who initiated a town centre planning refresh towards the end of last year. And I've lost our speaker. She's here. Yep, there we go. And Aaron's going to come and talk to us about that now and what emerged from that engagement process, which we thought was terrific. Just a reminder, we do stream this live on Facebook, so if anyone's got any concerns about that, you have been warned. So, thank you.
Where am I?
Well, hold or clip on somewhere.
All right.
Yeah, that's best.
See how we go. Okay. Technology. I can see myself ripping this off halfway through. So my name's Helena Seagrod. As Peter just said, I work for the Environment, Planning and Sustainable Development Directorate. So I've been working on the Gungahlin Town Centre Planning Refresh, and I think I've spoken with you previously earlier this year, and also I may have seen a few of you at a stakeholder workshop we held back in early May. So first of all, I just wanted to let everybody know, tonight we've also got Saeed Ali over here in the corner. Saeed and I are just in the process of transitioning over the project from myself to him, because he's got more capacity than me as well. So at future presentations you may well see Saeed. So why the planning refresh? A lot of you will be aware of why we're doing this. The last planning for the Gungahlin Town Centre was done in 2010. So we had the planning report released in 2010, which set out all the planning controls which govern what can and can't happen in the town centre in terms of development and land use, building heights, that sort of thing. A lot's changed since 2010. I think the most astonishing factor tonight to talk in terms of why we're doing it is between 2010 and 2017, the district's population in Gungahlin has increased by 26,950. So that's 63% increase in population. So that's more than the total population of Western Creek district. So it's grown a lot. But also too, there's major public and private investment happening in the centre. Of course, light rail's arriving soon and kicking off. We've had a lot of applications and approvals for high-rise buildings, which you'd be aware of up in that northwestern corner. There's also been a lot of new ACT government policies since 2010, the ACT Planning Strategy, Transport for Canberra from 2012, ACT Climate Change Strategy. So there's quite a lot of new policy, and we need to make sure that the planning controls for Gungahlin reflect that new policy. It's time to reassess the community's needs and aspirations for this centre. Is it heading in the right direction? Are people pleased with what's happening in Gungahlin, or would they like to see something else happening? So we went out and commenced engagement in early March 2017, this year, and we've focused on 3 key issues. So building heights and character, so what buildings look and feel, how they look and feel, upgrading and enhancing public spaces, and walking, cycling and road transport. What is the community's thoughts on these 3 key issues is what we wanted to know. So the planning refresh, and I'll talk more about the outcomes of our engagement in a moment, but the planning refresh is going to deliver on 3 key things. An engagement outcomes report will be delivered soon. We've almost finalised that. We'll also be delivering a planning report which includes all of the analysis that we've been doing in-house. And finally, we will deliver revised planning controls to the town centre, so an updated precinct code which governs what can happen in the centre or not happen. On those planning controls there will be further engagement yet again. So where are we in the process? I'm sorry if I'm in your way, I'm kind of in an awkward spot here. So back in March and to May, we had community engagement. Since then, what we've been doing is undertaking a whole range of different analysis processes. So traffic modelling is a really critical one, especially for Gungahlin. I know there's massive traffic issues up here. We've been modelling building heights and what building heights are appropriate for the centre in terms of overshadowing, bulk and scale. We're now working towards releasing an engagement report, summarising all the engagement outcomes. So tonight I'll be going over those briefly, but the report that comes out in October will detail very specifically what was said, what was heard, and it documents that all beautifully so you can understand the conversation that went on. We're looking at December releasing a planning report, which will include all of our analysis, and then February, roughly, so early 2018, releasing the draft territory plan variation for consultation. And that's the precinct code, just to de-jargon it. Community engagement. So I'll just talk through the process, the engagement activities we heard, what we heard, and the participation. The participation was incredible. We do a lot of these sort of engagements of centres around Canberra, and this particular engagement has absolutely, for me, blown me out of the water, the responses we've had. We had 935 responses to our online survey, which we've never had that level before, so it was a huge response. And I think, your community council was really active in promoting it, which was wonderful, so thank you. We had a Meet the Planners session, which was just held out in the Hiverson Street in front of the major shopping centres when we first kicked off the project. We held a stakeholder workshop, which we had 20 people turn up to. We had youth engagement events. This is something, we've got a fantastic team at EPSDD, and they actually go out and talk to all the schools. So it's wonderful to get that youth perspective because they use the centre very heavily. We had a planning in the pub event, and then there was all the other sorts of things we do, Twitter, Facebook. So huge response. So it was wonderful, and thank you anyone who did participate. So key messages that we heard from the community is that there is support for some high buildings in some places where it is considered appropriate. So near the light rail stops, right in the heart of the town centre, it is considered a bit more appropriate to have those higher buildings. People really value high quality design. That's something that's, people are wanting to see more, and people are feeling that's lacking at the moment as we're not getting great design outcomes. Everyone's wanting more attractive and active streets with outdoor eating, more green spaces and pocket parks, because there's not a huge amount of green space currently in the town centre, so it's lacking quite a bit, and especially if we're introducing more residential into this town centre, we really do need to provide the green relief and the place for people to go and recreate and have a bit of a break. Improving cycling and cyclist access and walkways. A really big one which came through is some of the blocks in Gungahlin are huge and they're really difficult to walk through. So you're walking for 300-400 metres before you have an option to turn as a pedestrian. So ensuring that new development provides for that pedestrian access. Considering traffic congestion, that's a no-brainer. I think we knew that before we started it, and it came out now, our engagement. And ensuring adequate community services. We're introducing a lot more residential into the centre at the moment, so where are the schools, where's the healthcare, all those sorts of things. So, preliminary directions, going back to those three themes that we just talked about earlier. So we're looking at building heights up to 10 stories for newly released blocks in Gungahlin East, so quite close in along Hiverson Street. And we're modelling all of those. We've got a wonderful modelling program. It's all very technical and above me, but they can actually essentially build the buildings in computer, and then we can look at them and understand how they work and overshadowing. Lower building heights in the retail core and stepping down towards the more suburban areas and the lower densities around the edges of the centre to minimise impact on those existing residents. Ensuring adequate setback privacy and reducing overshadowing of any taller buildings on surrounding areas. And looking at performance and design-led controls to improve design excellence. We're really keen to try and get better building design than what we're achieving at the moment, higher quality outcomes at ground level, a much more pleasant environment for people. In terms of upgrading and enhancing public spaces, we really want to encourage active and interesting building design, as I just said. More soft, basically green landscape spaces, Small-scale retail. I think the green space one's also really important. We've got climate change presenting tonight as well, and I think it's really important that we be looking at how we can introduce more greenery into the centre to help cool down the centre and make it a more pleasant space to be. And pocket parks, little quite small parks. Sydney, especially in the inner west, tend to do that really well, and they're quite popular and heavily used in those western areas of Sydney. So I think we should be looking at something like that for here. Cyclist and pedestrian networks, I think I've touched on these already, but safe and convenient pedestrian and cyclist access within the centre but also to the town centre. A lot of those connections aren't made very well or they're broken. Once again, those pedestrian access through large blocks, and finally really high quality travel links from the residential that's happening in the northwest. How can we make the pedestrian and cyclist connections from there, where we've got all the new residential going in at the moment, down into the town centre, a really high quality and pleasant experience? It's there. We've got to try and make it work for those people who live there. So finally, release engagement outcomes. The report for that we're aiming for next month, and then in December releasing the planning report, and then early next year consulting on the planning control, so the revised precinct code for the centre. So I hope that gives you a bit of an insight to where we're at with the project. I'd be interested to see if anyone's got some questions. I'm sure people do.
Any questions? Yeah, over back.
I guess with the release of the precinct code early in 2018, a couple of questions related to that. The current precinct code gives guidance on building heights, etc., but there are criteria against those building codes, and the people assessing those simply will go, yes, there's a high rise next to your building application. It's similar to that high rise, fine, don't need to build high rise. There's been previous surveys done by the Community Council where the community said we don't want high rise in Gungahlin, yet we've got a whole block of high rise. How can the community have confidence when you release a new building code? If the code is released, it'll probably be in the same format where there are criteria against the code, and people can come along with development models and go, we want to build high rise.
So we're working really closely with our development assessment team, looking at where those particular criteria haven't worked, the rule and criteria haven't worked, to prevent that happening. And I think you're referring to Precinct 2B, which is that northwestern component where you've got all that high rise. So yeah, we are looking at that, and whether that is actually removing a criteria in that response, or we need to tighten up those rules so that there's more certainty. And that's where we need to work with our development assessment team to say, what do you need for us to have in there so that you can actually say no where it's not appropriate.
So when you've got, because that's, I don't know, maybe it'll be past its use by, because there are DAs in the process now, and they're all above 14, 18 stories. We heard the other week a 26-storey proposals have been dropped down to 18, but that's still above 20 stories. So even though this is not released yet, is there an intention to say, hey, look, drop it to 10?
So those DAs that are in will be assessed against the current planning rules, but what we're doing is we're talking regularly and frequently with the development assessment team to try and work through how those DAs will be resolved.
Just here on the right.
Yeah, does the code or any future code have any prohibition against polyethylene flammable building cladding?
So that would be something that would probably be dealt with by the Building Code of Australia, as opposed to what's in our planning scheme, because that's something that would apply whole of Australia and whole of territory, as opposed to a precinct code, which is very place specific. So no, it won't include that sort of detail.
So you don't know whether there's any bans on the carbon material being used in the ACT?
I don't know, but that's outside of the scope of a precinct code to address that, unfortunately.
Yep, Kevin?
Is the, first of all, thanks for listening to us, because it does sound as though a lot of the things that people were talking about have been considered. I noticed that there wasn't anything about employment and office space and other things like that. Is that
Look, it's certainly a major consideration, especially for East Gungahlin. As we work through that area, we're sort of looking at going, okay, obviously this is a place where we could reserve spaces for businesses, and that's a really important consideration for us. And, you know, reserving a block for potentially, maybe one day, hopefully it'll happen, there'll be a federal department that would love to move to Gungahlin, and making sure that block's there, ready to go. So that is an important consideration for us as well.
One of the considerations early on for Gungahlin was in regards to a hospital. Now I do know that there was quite a lot of complexity involved in a hospital that maybe a lot of people didn't quite consider. I think I talked to Simon Corell about this when he was health minister. He said that a hospital can't just be created in the middle of nowhere. There's a lot of specialist sections that need to come together in order to create a hospital. We can't just create a So one of the concerns is in regards to reserving space within the Gungahlin CBD in order so that we can build that capacity over a longer period of time. So what I'm curious about is with planning is that if you're looking at health facilities for Gungahlin, have you thought about reservation of certain areas in order to build that type of infrastructure that Simon said that we would require before we can build a hospital?
Okay, first of all, thank you for raising that. I wasn't aware of that, so that's really good to know. So that'll be something we need to follow up. In response to that question of things like hospitals and medical facilities, which comes under that sort of broader banner of community facilities, how we sort of do this work is we do our engagement and we see what people's general thoughts are, and then we go, okay, well, right, what does that mean in terms of densities in the centre? And then once we sort of start to get an idea of where it would be appropriate to increase densities and where it's not appropriate, then we can build a model, and in that model we can understand how many people could potentially be living in the town centre over, you know, the next 10 to 20 years. And then with that, we have those numbers, we can then work out what are the community facilities that are needed. So that's part of our planning analysis work that we're doing, is we're getting those numbers so we can work out how much space do we need to reserve for community facilities and things like medical services and potentially hospitals. But I'd need to follow that up.
I think Megan can confirm this. I'm sure I read something that said that there was like a scoping study or something like that to sort of see whether or not something in the future might be able to do.
Very quickly, I remember Katie Gallagher when she was health minister. Essentially, when we were campaigning to get the subacute hospital in Gungahlin, making the point that it just didn't have the support of the medical specialist community, and it just wasn't ever going to happen. Now that the subacute hospital has been built at University of Canberra, I think, I don't know what the long-term strategy is, but I'd be surprised if that happened. We'll hear later on about the nurse walk-in centre. We can park that now and come back to it. That would be my preference. Yep, okay, let's do that. Any other questions before I start? Yeah?
I'm going to go back to the chestnut of building heights. In your presentation, you talked about over 900 responses to your survey. One of your colleagues came to a previous meeting and said that 900 was probably skewed by one particular IP address. I'm seeking some assurances from you that when you said the 10 stories is what you've got the community feedback for, is that going to be the height limit, or is that just placating us today by telling us, yes, we heard you wanted 10 stories and no more, and we're going to end up with something different because the rules are going to come out in 3 months' time, and how much weighting is going to give to that 900 when we believe that the 900 is in favour by that one IP address?
Okay, in response to that, I think it was 935 responses. That's been really interesting for us, and I've been completely fascinated by it because we've never had it happen before, because this is our first, for our division anyway, major online survey. So it's actually called astroturfing, and there are companies out there which specialise in this, which I thought was amazing. It's so dishonest. So what we actually did was we were able to see all the IP addresses for every single response, and we just went in and we identified where we had more than 2 responses. I think it was, we developed a criteria. I think it was about 2 or 3 responses from one IP address, because we thought, well, you might be getting a family responding from one household. And then we went through and we deleted the responses. So where we're getting 50 responses from one IP, we're just assuming that in that case we've been astroturfed and removing those. So we spent some time developing a criteria to deal with that. So we feel that, yes, while we did get 935, there were a chunk that were from one IP address, so we removed those, and then we're basing our results on that with the multiple IP addresses removed. So I'm hoping that deals with that, and we're fairly confident that it has. And then your other question was about the building heights and the 10 stories. So in terms of new development sites, new development sites will be subjected to whatever's in the revised precinct code once that takes effect.
The explanation of my question, is the revised building code going to stipulate 10 stories, or is that statement today just a reflection of what the feedback is, and we still might have 26 stories going up?
What we've heard from the feedback, and we're still writing the precinct code, but I'd say that yes, 10 stories would be the maximum.
So, seeing no other questions, I'll jump in. I appreciate that it was a refresh of the planning process, so we can't, your process doesn't actually address what's already happened with the approvals under the existing criteria. Can you give us some guidance on what approaches we can make to ESPD or D or other parts of government around? So now that we have essentially a small suburbs worth of residential development in that northwest corner, how do we adjust everything else that happens in the town centre, particularly the one that always comes up in consultation with us is what are we going to do about traffic? Because despite every development saying we'll have minimal impact on traffic, that kind of doesn't gel with most people's experiences. And how are we going to ensure that the schools are adequately going to be served? Because now we've got 4,500 people on that spot that maybe we hadn't planned for, or the Department of Education hadn't planned for in their forward planning. So how do we go back and sort of accept the fact that those approvals have happened, and whether it's good or bad is not the point, they've happened. How are we going to adjust what's happening with the town centre, apart from the planning changes, to address the fact that we have such a large concentration of people?
I think this sounds like something we might better tic-tac more detail afterwards, but in terms of the planning, because that's what I can talk to, is that with the planning refresh, and I spoke about it earlier, a really important part of our work is that we work out what the potential is in the centre and what's existing and what the potential is based on the modelling, and so that with that we can do a traffic analysis and see where the issues are, and we can make recommendations then to our colleagues about where there's priorities for upgrades, and it's also to that community facility questions around schools and medical services. That's where we do that modelling to get those numbers to say, right, this is the potential population increase in this centre, and based on what's current and what's potential, this is what we're going to need to service these people.
Well, that might be interesting. Any other closing? Yep.
So for Flannery, Executive Director of EPSBD, and I just, thanks Helena for pulling it all together. I thought it was really good in terms of explaining the community views, which are very interesting. Just in the point about building heights, so that what Helena has presented does reflect what the community's views are. Of course, that needs to be codified into the territory plan. So that will come back to you early 2018.
So I'll ask the same question. How much confidence do I have in the 10 stories being the maximum? I understand that's what the community has said. I'm effectively giving you an answer by saying you have confidence that we've listened and we've heard. It is subject to community consultation again, so there's 2 bites at it, and there'll be views. So have confidence that we'll be making recommendations, but it's not set in stone yet. I just need to make sure that we're aware of that. So that there is another whole process to go through in terms of legislating.
I guess, picking up on that point, we do have a current precinct code, and that precinct code limits to 23 stories, and it has criteria against that code. So there's already rules there. They're just not enforced. So when you go up to 10 stories, and you have criteria against those 10 stories, unless you lock down the criteria, there'll still be an avenue to be able to challenge that and go against that and exceed 10 stories. So I guess you can put that forward, but it's the confidence of the bureaucracy that assesses DA against the code, to actually enforce the code and not just roll over.
So can I just respond to that? With the rules and criteria, the rules is mandatory. That's what happens. And then in some cases we have these criteria, which is if you can demonstrate da-da-da-da-da, then we can override the rule. So one way we potentially could get around that is just to have a solid rule with no criteria. Or we need to make sure that the criteria that accompanies it is very tight. I think there's definitely a weakness in the rule and criteria that's let happen there.
I mean, case in point with the development, the response I got back from their representation was that thanks to that, the building application is consistent because there is a high-rise tower right next door, so it's consistent with that. Right, and by the way, to the houses, you've got Gungahlin Road separating you, so that's good enough. That just doesn't cut it.
To be clear, one of the reasons for doing the refresh was that we're aware that the precinct code that exists may not be delivering outcomes that are good for the community or that are in line with community views. That said, massive growth in the area, and so it's there's an economic situation that's been stimulated. So I just want don't want people to walk from this room and go, it's definitely this height. It's saying what Helena has presented is an overwhelming community view that there should be a height limit, and that's less than what is being.
And there is a subtlety there in that the overwhelming view is there is a height limit, not a height limit that can be worked around whilst it works. So just a quick question, how many people in this room, like as a reasonable sample of people who care about Gungahlin, how many of you actually looked at the DAs and waded through the document to find out what the developer has written against the criteria in their application? Okay, so a lot of that information is there, and the arguments are placed are not strong, but they are clearly enough to get the voice over the line. And I guess the challenge is for us to be aware of all these DAs that come up and respond to them. And that is another problem, that I think the visibility of the DA process is much poorer than I think a lot of the agencies actually think it is. I don't think a lot of people know what a DA is, or that they're available online, you can go and look at them.
So one thing we are doing, and we haven't put it for this presentation, but it might be available for some subsequent presentations, is we have a 3D model of the Gungahlin Centre, and so it might be, it's not, it's existing in some proposals that we can fly through, and it is being used at the moment to analyse how the DAs that are in are relating to each other.
Yep.
So that might be something for the future.
Yeah, that would be absolutely. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
That's
everyone.
excellent. It's been a very good process. The Community Council went to ESPDD late last year, and was the whole process going on. The planning refresh was embarked on pretty willingly, so that's been a really positive experience for us. Our next speaker is from Barton Planning.
Not Trevor, but Christy.
Right, okay. Barton Planning have been engaged by the proponents of Infinity Towers and the discussion today, or presentation today, is about the third tower, which is already approved, but we'll hear some more. Do you have slides, or are you just going with words?
We absolutely do. No,
I was about to say, an architectural company without slides. What an outrage. Who's speaking?
we both are. So this is Marcus Graham
That's
from
just-
Stewart Architecture.
Yep.
I shall start. Stewart Architecture. Sure. I'm a little. We can do that.
I've got a loud voice. That'll be fun.
Should have a quickie box. Nope.
Yeah. So I might just preface the discussion while we're getting the slides up. Oh, here we go. Is to just, I suppose, follow on with what's just been stated there, that there is a development approval that is in place. Obviously, you will see the activity that's occurring at the moment on the site for the Infinity Towers. If you cast your mind back to 2014, 2015, there was development approval processes that were occurring for those 3 blocks. Subsequently, there have been a change of hands in one of those blocks, and we are here representing pod projects tonight, so this is not affiliated to Geocon per se. So I just wanted to be clear about that so there was no misunderstanding. What we want to run you through tonight is to just take you through what I guess some of the parameters of the project were in 2014, 2015, and just talk you through some of the amendments that are starting to happen. We're at the beginning of the process. This DA is not lodged. We're hoping to get it lodged next month, but we're working through some of the impact studies at the moment. Just to refresh your memory, in case you aren't aware, we are talking... Sorry, I'm a little animated when I do these things, so I hope I don't cause any issue. But we are talking about Block 4, which is the vacant block at the moment that's adjacent to the 2 towers that's being constructed. As we zoom in, you can see it there. That's currently being used as a site compound for the construction of Infinity Towers. And that's specifically what we're talking about tonight. Following on, I guess, from what Helena was saying earlier, we are talking about quite an instrumental site. This has seen a lot of development in the recent time. This southwestern side of Gungahlin has had a lot of activity. But it's a really important part of the Gungahlin town centre. It's exciting to see this sort of investment happening here and all the flow-on effects that come from it. We've got a good frontage onto Gundaroo Drive, which is a major access point, and also onto Gribble Street. And I guess what you're starting to see now, because of all the construction activity, is that we've got a developing precinct within Gungahlin itself, which is quite exciting. And it is very accessible and connected, and I guess that's one of the best things about this area, is that we are talking about connections through to cycleways, we're talking about connection to pedestrian pathways, vehicular connections, and obviously you're getting the light rail coming through into Hibberson Street, which is wonderful for all the developments occurring in this town centre. To be really clear about the planning context that we're talking about here, we are in a CZ2 zoning, which does seek to have development occurring to a higher density and contribute to delivering a really vibrant town centre. It is a second order use within the commercial zonings, but it still calls for that density that we want to see in the town centres. To be very clear with you, obviously the discussion previously about heights is one that is evolving at the moment. This currently has a 23-metre building height under a rule, but the criteria in the territory plan allows you to argue for greater height. That height has already been approved, as it was in 2015, for a 14-storey building on that site. As I said, this is part of the previous Infinity Tower proposal. We are looking now at a new proposal for it that separates it out from Infinity Towers per se, but obviously still uses that site area. In terms of pod projects, this is the third project that Pod are doing within Gungahlin, and I think that's exciting because it shows the commitment they actually have to the town centres, and these sorts of developers are the ones we really enjoy working with because they have a genuine interest in delivering density in the town centres where we actually want it to occur. And particularly with Pod, they've had a very strong commitment to having a community conversation, so they've been present at many community engagement discussions through the previous years. Now, as I mentioned, we had 3 separate DAs approved in 2015 for the 3 individual towers on Infinity. 2 out of 3 of those blocks are now under construction, and the 4th block was transferred to Pod in the last year, Paul? Yeah. The proposal in 2015 approved 122 units within that building, and that was over 14 storeys. At that time, there was no particular active frontage provided to Gribble Street, which is something that we've sought to address through the proposal we're looking at now. This image would be quite familiar to you. You would have seen for Infinity Towers over the coming years, which really talks about a staggered building height that became really synonymous with those 3 blocks across that section. We're not looking to amend that sort of staggering in terms of the building heights. This gives you a bit more of a functional section as to how that would work across the 3 blocks, and the shortest tower is the one that we're talking about today on your left-hand side, which is Block 4. This probably doesn't represent too well, but what we wanted to highlight through this was to show that we didn't have the active frontages that we would like to see in a development, and given the nature of the zoning and the location in the town centre, we want to actually make sure that we've got active uses there, that people are sort of coming and going, not only a residential offering at the ground level. So we're quite excited to see, which Marcus will talk about shortly, about how we're going to use some of those ground floor spaces. I'm going to pass to Marcus to talk through the current scheme, and then I'll come back.
Thank you, Christy. I'll just hold that. We're glad to be on board this project, and we've seen it as a good opportunity to improve the current approved design, and then bring benefits to both the community and the developer. Now, the proposal you're about to see has the same number of floors as that approved in the Infinity design, so 14 stories. We've got new floor layouts that provide a more efficient floor plate. So on a typical floor, there's now 14 units. That's 14 smaller units, previously 11, and that improves housing affordability in the town centre. Importantly, as Christy mentioned, we've got commercial uses along the full length of Gribble Street. That was very important to us, and that activates the entire street frontage and creates a sense of entry to this part of the town centre from Gundaroo Drive. Additionally, we've got the residential lobby from Gribble Street, and that further enhances the activity along that street. And a very important change is that the previous scheme had all parking above ground in 5 levels of podium. So we've now got 3 levels of basement. So the majority of car parking has been relocated underground, and we're adding another 70 cars to the development. Now, we don't have fancy drawings at this stage. It's early days, so we've just got sketches, I'm afraid, but it shows the general idea and our thinking for the project. Now, this is the context plan, and what we want to show on this is that previously the Infinity proposal stretched right along Gundaroo Drive. It was quite an unbroken wall of development, particularly at podium level. What we've decided to do, or what we're proposing, we're also architects for Block 5, which is the development we've darkened there running north-south. So Block 4 will be an extension of that development we've already had approved on Block 5. So you can see here we're picking up the width of the development on Block 4, which is about 30 metres wide, and that actually increases the interface to the Infinity Tower. So we've managed to increase the interface. We also want to promote a landscape separation between Infinity and Block 5, and you can see that through the interface. And we've got what it hints at there. There's a core at the centre of the tower. You can see that core and the angled cut through the building. I'll show you that in more detail later, but what that is the residential core, the residential lobby on each floor, and there's a deep cut out of the building on each side. So every single resident and visitor, when they get out of the lifts, will have vistas north and south, and they're angled to both pick up sun. North is straight up the page, so you get good sun in that space, but also direct views away from the KDN development to the north and the Infinity to the south. Oh, and I will say that also will be quite an identifying feature as you drive along Gundaroo Drive and turn into the town centre. Context, this shows the heights. So as I mentioned, our new proposal, which, and don't read anything into the architecture yet, this is just meant to be a massing diagram, but to show it's 14 stories. And the KDN development to the south is also 14. The tower to the left, which is Block 5 that we've worked on, is 18, stepping down to 14, stepping down to 8. And then to the north are the 2 Infinity Towers, the closest being 22 stories. So we get a good visual variety, a variety of heights, which we find quite interesting. And because this new architecture breaks through to Gundaroo Drive, a variety of design also for the town centre. Here we're also highlighting that active frontage. So on Block 5 to Gribble Street, that burgundy colour is commercial usage. So we'd already established commercial frontage all the way around Block 5, but now we're continuing it all the way to Gundaroo Drive. And that's north-facing or north-east-facing, so it's getting beautiful morning sun. It's got a lovely scale, and there's street parking and street trees there. So it really does promote activation of the town centre. I'll also show up on the rooftop, there's the green, that's a green roof. So that's for all the residents, north-facing green roof. I must admit I'm not sure if the Infinity proposal had a green roof up there, but generally when we have a rooftop, we like to make it active for residents. Now, this is the ground floor, first of all. On the right, sorry, we don't have street names on here, but on the right, running north-south, is Gribble Street. So that's the commercial tenancies. That totals about 550 square metres, and it's designed to be either big tenancies or broken down into smaller businesses. So there's a lot of opportunity, though, for that to be cafe, for example, spilling onto the street. Behind that is the car parking, and all of the vehicular entry and exit and servicing is off that service laneway. So that's all located to the south of the site. And in the middle you can see the residential lobby, also part of that big cut that runs through the building. So that's at the centre on the Gribble Street frontage, and that's the residential entry to the scheme. Now, above ground there's ground level parking and one more level. But below ground is the basement. So there's 3 stories of basement below ground. It's efficiently designed. We do basements well. It's a tight little site, actually, but we've managed to really get as many cars in there as efficiently as we can. And that means once you're up to level 2, you've got a podium. So that's a residence podium at level 2 in the gap between Infinity and redesigned tower. It'll have gardens. It has a pool looking towards Gundaroo Drive. There's a nice stand of trees already in that verge between the site and Gundaroo Drive, and it achieves good northern sun. So it'll be a nice space. And you can see there's starting to hint at the cut in the building, so all residents at level 2 can get out of their lifts and walk out to that garden. This is the typical floor plan. Now, this is showing that cut, and you can see you come out of the lifts and you've got that wonderful view in each direction for all residents, and then you walk to your unit. Now, this is showing the 14 units per floor, and not every floor will be like this. We're still developing. There'll be spots higher in the building where we might have only 10 units or 8 units per floor. So this shows the most efficient possible design, and that cut also allows us to have or maximise the external facade of the building. So we'll be able to get units with little pop-outs for bedroom windows. It means we can have very efficient floor plates and really maximise the outcome of this building. And at the roof, where normally you might have condensers or rooftop plant, we've got on the north a roof garden, again for all of the residents, come up the lift to the roof, and then enclosed plant room. So the Infinity scheme has at least enclosed plant room. As I said, I'm not sure if it had a roof garden, but that's something we do think is important on any development. And this is a section, this is a month or so ago. There is one more level of basement now, but it gives an idea of the scheme. So there's 3 levels of basement. This is Infinity on the left, and you can see it rises up quite a lot higher to 22 stories. There's 2 levels of parking above ground, which has a frontage of that commercial. Now, we're not sure at this stage, is it double height commercial, is it mezzanine commercial, or is it even shop top housing? We'll have a look at that. But then the tower itself starts and rises up to 14 stories with the rooftop garden. And in that interface between that's what the podium was previously on the site, that 5 level. So that shows how much that podium has dropped with this proposal. But you can see that garden with the pool in the separation in between, and then on Gribble Street, the street parking, the street trees, and the opportunity for outdoor cafes. So the summary of the benefits, we've achieved increased development efficiency, and that's definitely both for the benefit of the developer but also the community. We've got additional parking on site. There will be additional apartments as well because we've got a more efficient design, but there is also 70 additional cars on site. We've got commercial activation of Gribble Street, also residential activation of Gribble Street with the lobby popping out there, and all of the main parameters are similar to the previous DA approval, and the most important one in many ways is the height. We're matching the 14 stories of the previous development approval. Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
So your 2014 approval was for 122 units.
Yes.
What's the number of units in this new design?
If we went with the most efficient floor plan on every floor, I think it works. It's 14 per floor over 12 floors. So I think it works out 172 is possible, but they are all smaller units as well. They were quite large units in the original design. I will note we had nothing to do with the original DA. That was another architectural firm, so I'm a little bit sketchy on the details of it, but there will be more apartments. Yes. Yep.
Yep. Yeah. So that's, I guess, great. Push the parking down, so we've got interest in basically. So you stated that your design has benefit and efficiency for the developer and the community. Assuming community is current residents, could you define the benefit of this development for the current community?
Yeah, I believe the most important benefit is the commercial frontage along Gribble Street and the opportunity for business and activation along that whole street frontage, and removing what was a 5-storey, I think it was a blank podium to Gribble Street as well, facing the new development to the north east. So I'm pretty sure that it was all car parking for 5 stories, and I'm pretty sure it would have ended up being a blank facade or a heavily louvered facade. So I think that's a real opportunity or improvement to the streetscape. And this is an important street where you enter from Gungahlin Drive into the town centre. It's north facing as well, so it's a great outcome for the businesses. And also the additional landscape. So it isn't landscape at ground level, but it's landscape at level 2. And for all of the residents, both in Infinity and this development, you'll be looking down on a landscape link from that wide verge of Gungahlin Drive through into the centre of this little precinct.
Just to be clear, the entrance, there's no physical vehicular entrance on Gungahlin Drive.
There is not. All vehicular entry is from the laneway between Block 4 and Block 5. So, yeah.
Just one over here. Great that you've got the commercial stuff down the bottom. Have you considered having 2 or 3 floors above that as commercial as well?
No, we mainly saw the opportunity for retail. We thought that was the advice we were getting is retail. Small retail tenancies would be most valid. Yeah.
This is a commercial
Yeah.
zoned area.
Yeah.
It would have been perhaps nice for you to have gone back to what the original intent of the precinct was, to get a little bit of office space in there.
Yeah. We admittedly, no, we didn't look at commercial above the ground and level 1. We saw it mainly as a retail opportunity because we understand that is what is in most demand at the moment. So I admit we didn't look at office usage.
There's something that precludes us, I suppose, from asking the question now of people involved in the market to see what the uptake is and to see whether there's any potential for flexibility.
Potential workers nearby.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Which is why there are a lot of workers nearby, which is why we thought the cafe and those sort of service businesses were most appropriate. Yeah.
I mean, I hate people when they say it's efficient when it's smaller. Why don't you just say that they're smaller blocks rather than efficient?
You don't want a 62 square metre unit?
Well, some people do though.
I know.
Yeah.
It just, an old crusty like me looks at it and goes, my goodness.
And architecturally, I will say, when I say efficient, it also means it's a very sensible construction now. The old scheme, we looked at it, has a lot of transfer and complexity in construction. This one's a simple construction. Normally when we achieve that, we're able to put more money into elements that matter, like the public domain, the facades and the amenities within the building. Yeah, we don't like wasting money on structural fancy bits and things. Yes.
I take your point about the retail opportunities there on Gribble Street. My question question is more in terms of the practicalities of getting people to use those retail spaces. What consideration has been given to impact of people trying to park to be able to use them? Or is there anything built into your proposal, or is it relying on the parking that's already available?
Well, for the retail, for that frontage, we do a lot of development, mixed-use development, and we don't believe retail works unless you can park in front of it. So predominantly, yes, we are relying on that car parking that's already on the verge in front of the development. So yes, that will be the primary parking for the retail, I believe.
I think when we then look at the balance of the additional car parking that's being provided, we're also making sure that car parking at grade is freed up. They don't have visitors parking in that. So the increase of potentially 40 to 50 dwellings is being balanced by anywhere between 70 and 100 more car parking spaces. So on balance, you have more parking spaces being provided than is required.
Darren? Many of the developers that we talk to say that the legislation from the government doesn't actually dictate that you need to have a visitor parking, for example. And a lot of the apartment complexes that we've got in the area actually have difficulty because there's not enough car parking spaces. Okay, the residents can park there, but any visitors that come, they have to basically park out on the street, which is a bonanza for the government and parking tickets, but ultimately for the residents around, they're simply having to find their way around. If they want to visit these businesses, there's nowhere to park. And so that's obviously a big concern. Something that I think that you mentioned once before was about the elephant in the room is the reason why you pick there isn't necessarily because it's near the town centre, it's because Yarrawee Ponds is right across the road and it's a really nice outlook. But it would be nice to see the developers actually contributing something to the community, maybe for the park across the road in order to put some facilities in there that will be used by the community as well as people who live there. And there's that access, how they're going to get across the road if it's then expanded and those types of things about if people want to have access to Yarrawee Ponds, about how that's going to be worked into the plan as well. So.
I think you guys probably want to, like you've hit the nail on the head in terms of the question to ask. And I say this noting that my client's in the room, but what we need to challenge developers to do is say, the height has ways that it can be mitigated. So if we look at the traffic, we look at overshadowing, we look at the passive solar access to the apartments. If that is dealt with, we then need to be saying to developers, well, what are you giving back to the community? What are the community benefits that come from putting this increased density here? And those sorts of ideas are really great to say, well, you know what, Yarrawee Ponds is a really valued part of our community and we use it. So what can we see developers starting to do to contribute to that?
I think in the new development they've got is it a venture playground being built in the new developments, and I think it's Moncrief or somewhere out towards that area. One of the newest stats, it's right on the border of Gungahlin. You can see this playground thing being built there for the community by the developers that are building networks out there. So something like that, considering the people who live there are going to be using it.
Absolutely, and it's a selling point for the development, it's a benefit for the community that lives there now, and it's a benefit for the future community that's going to use that. And those are the really, I guess, important questions, I think, to be asking.
Just the last question on this one. Just one quick one. Helena earlier mentioned about quality of materials and looks of the building. What I'd like to know is, when you're designing a building such as this, how long do you expect it to last? For example, the life of type of this sort of building.
That's a good question. Our firm, Stewart Architecture, developments we've done like the Realm in Barton, a lot of the Bridgepoint at the foreshore, Link in Belconnen. And a consistent thing across all of those buildings is that rarely, if ever, have we used render. Rarely, if ever, do we paint the outside of the building. It's normally brickwork, precast concrete, even coloured precast, but the colour's poured into the concrete. So we like buildings that don't age. If they do age, they age gracefully, and that's part of what they're meant to do, and they don't need maintenance. So we pride ourselves on designing buildings, and we think about it from the beginning, that last a lot longer than we plan to. Yeah, they'll be here a long time. Yeah.
I think also the nature of clients such as projects? What we see from those sorts of developers is a commitment to the ongoing longevity of that building, and those are the sorts of clients we enjoy working with, is because they recognise they're contributing to the fabric of a town centre.
Sure, but bear in mind, nothing lasts forever.
Oh, no, it doesn't. No.
I'm not going to last 50 years, for example. But somebody could buy a unit here, and in 20 years, if that building gets knocked down, they've done nothing.
Yeah, but I guess that design philosophy needs to be embedded from the start, and part of that comes with the money associated to making sure the build is the best it can be at the start. And projects has that commitment to making sure that we do have the best possible product occurring on site, and so that it does have longevity, so that the maintenance issues that Marcus are talking about, you don't have something that requires repainting within 5 or 8 years of it being constructed.
Don't forget to use the microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Better repeat.
I think I'm done.
You were coming back for a few words at the end?
No, it was just to do questions and stuff. So
Okay,
if there's no other questions, we're good.
Right. We all done on that one? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Positive, courage.
And as Helen mentioned, we now have Anna from the ACT Climate Change Project to give us an update on where they've got to and what's happening. So just get that going. Oh no, close it. You're already on here. Climate change strategy. Go. Looks like it. No, that's ours. Mine now.
Thank you.
Do you want to clip on? That'd be
Yeah,
great.
great.
Thank you very much.
Really?
We should have mentioned that, Taz.
What are you?
A black one, please.
Right.
Great, thanks Peter. So yes, I'm Anna Maguire. I work with the Climate Change Policy Team with the Environment Planning and Sustainable Development Directorate. This is my colleague Catherine Kiernan.
Hello.
So we're just here to give a bit of a quick update on the work that we're doing on climate change policy, that is both reducing emissions and adapting to climate change impacts. So I'll do the first part and then Catherine will jump in to talk about adaptation. So as some of you are probably aware, we've been doing some thinking this year about the future direction for achieving the government's target of net zero emissions for the ACT by 2050. So we're just going to talk through a bit about what the government's current policies are around climate change and that work that we're doing. And then we'll talk about the next steps, the future direction. So as you might know, the ACT has some really ambitious climate change targets. So these are world-leading targets that we can be proud to say that we're on track to achieve. So this includes being powered by 100% renewable electricity by 2020 and reducing our greenhouse gas emissions by 40% from 1990 levels by 2020 as well. And achieving net zero emissions for the ACT by 2050 at the latest. So when we say net zero, we mean that the emissions that result from activities in the ACT on balance with the sequestration or the carbon taken up by trees and soils is zero on balance. And so we're also doing some work around developing interim targets to keep us on track to achieve that net zero target by 2050. So I won't go through these, but it's just to say that as well as having these targets, we're working with jurisdictions in Australia and around the world to really make sure that we do everything we can to address climate change and to reduce emissions in line with what's needed as agreed in the Paris Agreement and the international agreements that are currently standing. So obviously, climate change is a really broad issue. Our work relates to every area of government operations and everything we do in our communities, really. So this is about working with the existing policy framework that government has, so across areas such as transport, planning, nature conservation, water policy, and then we've got our sustainable energy policy and our actual climate change adaptation strategy and climate change strategy and action plan, or AP2 as we call it. So yeah, our work really cuts across all of those areas and we do our best to align our work with those other strategies and policies that government has.
this is a lot of information on one slide, but it's just to show a bit of background about how we're achieving the renewable energy target. So my apologies for you over here if I'm in the way, but these are the wind farms and solar farms that the ACT government has contracted to achieve that 100% target. And they're both in the ACT as well as in South Australia, Victoria, New South Wales, and South Australia. Did I say that? Yes, so they're all across there. And it's a really innovative way that we've gone about doing that, and other jurisdictions are now taking up that reverse auction process that we set in place to achieve that. As well as that renewable energy work, we're also working to improve energy efficiency through programs like the Energy Efficiency Improvement Scheme, which works with households and businesses to help them improve their efficiency of electricity and gas use. So that's helping to bring emissions down, but it's also helping to manage demand, which is a really important part of being able to maintain our renewable energy target beyond 2020 as well. We also have the ACSMART programs. You might be familiar with the ACSMART website, that is the government's portal for sustainability information. And we have the Carbon Neutral Government program. So as well as those broader ACT targets, the government has a target of achieving carbon neutrality for government operations by 2020. And is working away on achieving that one as well. You might also have heard some information about hydrogen in the ACT. So as part of that renewable energy work, we have some investment in hydrogen technology in the ACT. So we will soon have a fleet of hydrogen-powered cars in the ACT, and some work really driving, I guess, research and development in that area as well. And finally, I think we have a program of battery storage, so the next generation battery storage rollout, where we will be rolling out batteries to 5,000 homes and businesses across the ACT by 2020. And this is, again, an important part of helping to manage that peak electricity demand and improving our energy security as well. So at this point, I'll hand over to Catherine. Thanks.
Right, so what are we doing to reduce our vulnerability to the impacts from climate change, because the climate is changing, and increasing our resilience? So what that means is, how can we bounce back after we have an extreme event, like the 2003 firestorm, or like a major flash flood and storm event? We need to be able to understand what the risks are, the climate risks, and what we can then do to, in our city, make ourselves more resilient to manage the risks and bounce back from when those events happen, because they will happen. And the greenhouse gas emissions that are in the atmosphere now mean that we're going to have continued warming and drying climate in our part of Australia until at least the middle of the century. And hopefully the world will get on board and we'll reduce the greenhouse gas emissions and reduce the greenhouse effect, and therefore we won't progress to really scary temperature rises. With the Paris Agreement, we're heading towards a maximum of 2 degrees. So that's where we're hoping we'll stay below, because after that the climate consequences are quite unanticipated. So we need to be able to work together, and one of the great things about coming to a forum like this is to explain the work that we're doing and get you guys to be all on board, because climate change affects everybody and it's everyone's responsibility to understand and to contribute, and what the government's doing our bit, but we also need everyone else to understand and help too. Natural disasters obviously put strains on our health systems and on our emergency services, so if we don't act to be mindful of what the impacts are and act now to overcome those and put in place measures to reduce the impacts, it's going to cost us more as taxpayers. So what we have is, this is the document that was mentioned, we call it AP2, the Action Plan 2 on our climate change strategy. This is produced in 2012. And in 2016, we produced this one about adapting to a warming climate. So this is where we're mostly focusing on emissions reduction, and Anna has described what it is that we've been doing, busy working away to reduce our emissions. And this is the strategy that talks about how we can adapt to the changing climate and how we can work together to make ourselves less vulnerable, more resilient. And there's a little snapshot brochure that talks on the back cover about what the climate risks are and over time. So we're heading towards looking at out to 2050, to mid-century. So it's well beyond a lot of people's lifetimes, but we're looking to the future generation and what we're doing to make the city sustainable in the longer term. So we know that, for example, there's going to be an increased risk of bushfires as the climate warms and gets drier, and if we get spring rain and it produces a whole lot of growth, but then it dries off and gets hot in the forests, then the risks of fires are greater. We have a higher risk of heat waves, and with a warming temperature you get more and longer heat waves, which for very young people or very old people who can't thermoregulate, it means that their life's in danger. So the vulnerable people in our community, we need to really be looking after them and working out what to do to protect them as well. I mentioned severe storms and thunderstorms. So we know already that in Canberra we can get a freak hailstorm and then you get rain and then the gutters block up and we get inundation, or the stormwater drains fill up and we get puddles of water where it should be a dry road. Those are the sort of things we're looking at with the adaptation strategy and what to do about it. I mentioned this is the work we've done, and we've done it in sectors so that we've grouped things together that make sense. So we've got settlements and infrastructure, which is about the city and how it operates and what we build. Natural resources and ecosystems, so our non-urban lands, our bushlands, our reserves, our farms. Water, and we're part of the Murray-Darling Basin, a very important thing to consider. With a drying climate, do we have enough water resources for us to drink and for nature as well, and for downstream? And community health and wellbeing. So I just mentioned when you have increasing populations vulnerable to these impacts from a changing climate, what are we going to do to reduce the problems to our health system and make us all able to be feeling, well, it's happened, it's been horrible, but we can get on with our lives. And disaster emergency, we all know what a great job our service people do. So then, what next? Anna mentioned that we're working away on the policies and the adaptation, the AP2 was out in 2012, so now it's getting a bit old and we're looking at doing a refresh of the policies. And so what is it that we have as a vision in doing that refresh of our policies and rethinking where should we go after 2020? And so it's very important that we capture what the community is telling us already that they want, and that is dovetailed with other policies from planning, from transport. So we know we're aiming for net zero carbon emissions. We want it to be climate resilient with fit for purpose buildings and infrastructure, and a thriving place, a community that we can all live in and enjoy a quality of life that and preserve our wildlife as well. So corroboree frogs that live up in the alpine areas, they're going to be having trouble in a hot, dry climate. So we need to take measures to protect ourselves and the rest of our natural environment. We've had 2 roundtables so far this year, and we intend to have another one later in the year to be able to capture your ideas and talk about what we're thinking and the pathways, what we're looking at, what the issues are. And we're committed, the government's committed to working very closely with the community to develop this next strategy. It was a key plank of how we developed AP2, and we're continuing that role and that work of working with the community because we can't do it without you. We're doing it with you. So 2050, Anna's mentioned the interim targets. So we've got the target for 2020. We're rapidly approaching that, which is why we're refreshing the policy. We know we've got a Paris target out to 2050 for zero net emissions. But what are the targets in between? So 2025, 30, we need to set those and work with you to be able to achieve them, particularly in relation to transport. And of course, we know that with projects like rail, you have opportunities to change the planning. And so the city is evolving and changing, and our policies need to reflect that, including with climate change policy. We are already a global leader, and we want to continue to lead and show what can be done. Ourselves in South Australia have a healthy competition in who's doing the best things for its community in Australia. And then part of the reason for that leadership is it brings jobs, it brings research and development, and we've got some fabulous research institutions here and start-up businesses that the government is enabling because of that leadership role that we're taking. So these are older diagrams that probably a bit hard to read with the light in this room. You can't see the colour differences, but basically it's splitting up the emissions by land use, energy, transport, waste and other. And if this little device will allow me, not very well, the biggest chunk is energy, but as we go forward to renewable energy by 2020, the next biggest chunk will be transport. And so the donut on the far side shows how 68% will be transport, and so that is going to be the focus of what do we do to reduce our emissions when they're coming from the transport sector. And then this is a little graph that combines it all in a different way to show how to get to 2050 with zero emissions. And it's an indication of the research work that we're doing, and we'll be sharing with you later in the year as we develop what the possible pathways are, possible targets are for between now and 2050. So we're doing some more detailed emissions modelling with some scientists and consultants, and we'll share that when we have it available. Thank you.
Any questions on the climate change strategy? Yes, Darren.
You talk about the basically you're going to have 100% renewable energy by 2020. I've seen Shane Rattenbury post this a lot about the developments, and I think that it's a good thing. I'm not saying it's not. But I just don't really understand how you can get to 100% renewables when you don't have grid level storage. I mean, it's good that you have 200 or 5,000 batteries going out, but unless you, scientifically, unless you have grid level energy storage, you're not going to have 100% renewable energy. You're going to be taking power from the grid from somewhere, and that power is probably going to come from coal-fired power stations from other states. So scientifically, can you honestly say that without grid level storage that you're going to be able to have 100% renewable when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And so the renewable energy target is based on our connection to the national electricity market. So we have effectively purchased the equivalent amount of renewable electricity as what is used in the ACT every year. And so we don't use that electricity solely. It's more that our work has resulted in the generation of that electricity, and that's fed into the national grid. So because it's a national network, a national electricity grid, and we don't have all of that energy generation in the ACT, that was the best way that we could achieve it. If you wanted to be independent of that national electricity market, then yeah, you would definitely need some pretty massive battery storage, something like South Australia is looking at the moment. But we're really fortunate in the ACT to have really good connectivity to that national grid, because it means that we don't have to invest in that very expensive technology.
So you're still using dirty power, but you're just kind of offsetting it a little bit by generating it renewably for the entire grid?
Yeah, it's like buying green power for the entire ACT, only with the benefits of the local investment and other research and development that's going on.
And you're hydrogen cars, is it going to go the way of the electric car system? I mean, the ACT was going to implement an ACT-wide electric car system. You've got charging points that have been there for years, but that fell through. Is there a concrete sort of plan forward to get this hydrogen, get a hydrogen network or an electricity charging station network?
Yeah, there's definitely talk. It's more the transport area, but as far as I'm aware, there's definitely work going on about improving the electric vehicle charging infrastructure. The hydrogen project, I'd have to say, it's very much a trial as far as I'm aware, and it's a wait and see what happens with that.
So it's not a case of that we tried it and it failed and we haven't done it. It's a case of we're still trying to build up the business case to see whether it's financially viable, because as a taxpayer, I don't want anyone spending money on things that are going to be a waste of money or putting us way out there in fairyland. We want to actually make sure that what we're doing is cost effective and robust, and we can drive where we need to drive with vehicles that are going to be able to be serviced, with vehicles that are going to be able to have a resale value. And so that we are a small jurisdiction in New South Wales. We import all of our cars, and so it's part of how we have to live. We might have these aspirations, but we can't do it alone. So that's why it hasn't progressed as fast as what we might have hoped.
Yeah, behind you, Dan.
You mentioned batteries just in passing, 5,000 batteries, but haven't considered off-river pumped hydro?
Do you mean for the ACT?
Well, it's part of your renewable target, renewable energy target, trying to store energy that you're...
pumped hydro.
Pumped hydro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But off-river pumped hydro.
Off the Murrumbidgee?
No, off any river.
Oh, off any river, yeah, okay.
You just
right.
need two levels.
Yes, no, I
upper,
see.
lower level,
Put in an ACT hydro system.
Possibly.
Yeah, I don't know is the answer.
I have heard that Arrowillan, for instance, in the mines, old mines down Arrowillan might be a very good possibility. Small reservoir down the bottom of the mine, top of the mine, and you just circulate the water between them.
Yeah, so there's a lot more people in our team other than just Anna and I, and there's a number of things that they're exploring for the energy generation. They're not here tonight, and we can actually take that question on board and get back to you.
Just one here in her shirt.
Totally support and applaud your work. I think it's great. I think one of your major stakeholders is letting me down in Gungahlin, that's Transport Canberra. We've got an instance here where we've got a bus layover on Anthony Rolfe right outside a childcare centre. What the bus drivers do is they park their buses, they leave their engines running for up to half an hour, sometimes 8, 9, 10 buses, and then they go in and have their smoke or their food with the buses running. So it's air pollution, noise pollution, right outside a childcare centre. And I think we need to look at that because it's terrible. And I brought it up with the bus company, and they're looking at action, and they're looking at moving that site, but hopefully they're still looking at moving it because it's just a minimum.
Okay, yeah, it's a good point. I mean, maybe that's something for the carbon neutral government team to consider, but it's also maybe a transport policy and planning issue that we can pass on as well.
But we'll pass it on.
Thank you.
Andrew,
Yep. Just in terms of climate change adaptation, the grid is going to get even more flaky with climate change. Are we looking into how we can actually become more self-resilient in terms of if the national grid goes down, the ACT can keep its lights going?
I don't know whether we're looking at going off-grid, off the national grid.
Not off-grid, but just how can we increase our resilience so if the national grid is failing, we can at least keep vital services running more effectively?
Sure. So I know that's how resilient are we and how subject are we to the failings of other places is certainly a discussion that is exercising the minds of our energy team. And so, yes, I can't say exactly what they're doing about it, but I know they talk about it quite a lot.
Is the cost of electricity a factor in your renewable energy targets?
Yes.
Yes.
Definitely. It has to be affordable.
Oh, it's just gone up 20% in July, so I'm just wondering.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so definitely the cost of that is factored into the decisions around what the target would be. As far as I'm aware, the recent electricity price increases were more about national network costs.
That was that grid you were talking about.
That's right,
Yeah.
the national electricity market.
Yeah.
Far back corner of the end.
Yeah, sure. I was just thinking, Darren mentioned something about the hydrogen and the electric car network. It occurs to me that one reason it may not have worked is that a lot of people probably have good intentions, changing out their car or the like. But I know across the country, generally in Australia, we haven't had great take-up of electric cars because relative to other countries, we don't have subsidies in place.
I think it was going to be the ACT government that was going to have the cars, wasn't it? It wasn't supposed to be implemented by the ACT government.
Well, we do have some.
I'm not sure of that scheme exactly, but it's definitely something that government's looking at, is increasing the proportion of the fleet vehicles that are electric. But there are a few barriers at the moment, including lack of availability of good electric vehicles at this point in time.
So my actual question was, have you done something maybe on a more individual level as opposed to big, large-scale economic modelling? Looks at a tipping point economically for individual people. So that is, with a lot of product adoption curves, it may not necessarily be the 50% point that gets people over the line. It might be earlier or later than that, because they have to change so much around their lifestyle to get to the point where even if they could, say, afford an electric car, but the infrastructure is there and the way that they can change their lifestyle to make that work for them is there as well.
Cheaper.
Yeah, so there's a low emissions vehicles strategy being developed at the moment, which is looking at all of those kind of considerations. So what incentives might work for people and what infrastructure would be needed so that it does become easy for people to do. But it's very much a work in progress.
And so are we talking about that, I guess what I'm saying, at a focus group level, individual level, as in how would people on their day-to-day lives change their behaviour to make that happen, as opposed to, look, we think there's X amount of people who can afford this on the basis of kind of straight line modelling.
Sure. No, it's a great point.
I don't know, do you know?
No, I don't think, I'm not involved in that team doing that work, but it's a great point and I'll take it back to the team.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And one just here, and we'll get close to the end of this.
The solar farms that are being developed are a good idea because it's the grid pumped up with renewable energy, but especially when you pass one at Majura, it's a very large area, so across the ground, and so it takes up green space that could be a bunch of trees. So at the moment you've got solar farms and then you've got private arrangements, and notwithstanding subsidies, it's expensive for individual households to put solar panels on roofs. But looking at more of a grid focus, as you described, we've got a lot of roof space around Canberra. So if you were to use that roof space for solar panels, not necessarily benefit the individual household, but get plugged into the grid. There's enough orientation, or different orientations of houses where you could amortise that and still get the benefit of the sun in all directions. And you're making use of roofs that just heat up during the day, you're not taking up green space.
Yeah, that's a good point. I know there are some schemes around. There's a low-income solar scheme, which is aiming to make investment in solar accessible for people who maybe don't own a house, that kind of thing. I know there are also companies that work with government organisations and businesses to install a system and then sell them the electricity so that the upfront cost doesn't fall to the business or homeowner. But yeah.
Yeah, so it has been looked at in general, and you're right, there's a lot of roofs that don't have PVs on them that could have, but I guess what we're doing is we're at the beginning of this journey and working out how best to proceed, and it may be that as we go past 2020 and we have these decadal targets and interdecadal targets, we look more closely at working with commercial properties, but because commercial properties often have strata titles or the building's owned by somebody far away and tenanted, it's not as simple as a household that has a roof that they own that they can put the PV on. So it is more complex, and that's why we've done the simple one first and encourage that behaviour change and encourage that thinking and that mindset that you've just mentioned.
Well, yeah, all right, I think that was all the questions we had. Anna and T, thank you very much. That was more you talk about all the options and angles in this area, the more expansive it seems. So thank you very much for that. Thank you. Our last speaker this evening is Minister Megan Fitzharris, member for MLA for Yerrabee. I noticed that there are a couple of other MLAs who Yerrabee is here, so thank you for coming along and enjoying the Community Council night. And such a big crowd. I'm pretty pumped about the size of the crowd. So, Megan, if you'd like to come forward, I'll get rid of this slide and let you.
Oh, actually, maybe you could do me, because
Oh, handouts.
Well, now I feel terrible. Hi, everyone. I didn't bring slides. Usually by the time
It's okay.
we've been a few slides.
You won't get
next time
marked
I'll
down.
bring slides, but I did bring some goodies, and I might talk to this particular one, and I didn't bring enough because there's more people here than usual, which is terrific. So
there's this thing called the internet. So if you give us an electronic one,
and
we'll
I
share
can
it.
give you some of those
So
as well. It's well and truly up there. So I've got stickers too.
Stickers? Stickers? Well, we want per table.
Okay, great. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for those fantastic presentations before too. They're all excellent. So, as Peter said, for those who don't know me, I'm Megan Fitzharris, Labor member for Yerrabee, and also a Minister for Health and Wellbeing, Transport and City Services, Higher Education, Research and Training, and my colleague Michael Pedersen here, who's also another Labor member for Yerrabee. So Peter asked me to come along tonight to give a couple of updates on about 4 specific things. So I'm really, I'm prepared for that without slides, but I can also respond to a couple of the other comments that have been made tonight and really take questions from people, whether they're specifically related to Gungahlin or the presentations tonight, or they might actually have something to do with my portfolios across the whole city, which would be particularly great to talk about as well. So Peter asked me to talk briefly about buses, and particularly buses in new suburbs. So, and that's particularly relevant, obviously, here in Gungahlin around services to Jacker and Moncrief. So I'll take a step back and let you know a couple of things. So, as you know, Light Rail is planned to be operational late next year, and happy to take any questions on that because it's terrifically exciting, but I know that everyone knows there's a lot of construction underway because it's pretty obvious. What we are doing between now and when Light Rail starts operating is having a really significant look at our bus network. To do a couple of things. One is to introduce new rapid services, and I'll talk about a couple of those that are just being introduced in October, and then also looking at how we redesign the overall bus network right across the city to get Light Rail operating, because one of the things that Light Rail does, it does a whole lot of things, but it adds to our overall bus and transport network. So those buses, if you think about it in simple terms, those buses currently travelling along the same route from Gungahlin to the town centre. Once Light Rail starts operating, we pick all those buses up and we deploy them somewhere else around the network. So it's a net gain to the overall transport network. So we need to do a lot of work to make sure that there's good feeder services in Gungahlin to get into the town centre for Light Rail, and then also look at also deploying the new rapid buses, which we are planning to deploy 7 new rapid services right across the territory over the next four years. So we have a major network change starting in October. And I've got some information about that here too so that I can pick up. It means that there are some timetable changes across a lot of the bus services, but it does excitingly mean it's introducing 2 new rapid services. So rapid services are those that run 15 minutes or better from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday to Friday. So we're introducing 2 new rapid services. The 2 we've currently got are the Red Rapid, which, who's caught the Red Rapid? Yep, most people, that's the route from Gungahlin to Fishwick. And we also have the Blue Rapid, which is our most used rapid service, and that runs from Belconnen to Tuggeranong. So we're introducing in October the Green Rapid, which is Woden via the inner south through to the city, and we're introducing the Black Rapid, which is probably most relevant to people here, which is from Belconnen to Gungahlin. That's the current 250 route, the slightly different actual route, just running a lot more frequently. In addition, what we've been able to do, which I'm really excited about in the October update, is make the Red Rapid a 7-day-a-week service. So currently, it only runs Monday to Friday, but we're able to make that now a 7-day-a-week service. And there's some information really on the rapid routes on the back of this particular handout here, which I'll leave. And again, as Peter said, all the information is online. So what the rest of the network is also doing with this change is we're looking at getting more buses more frequently. So, our big bold vision for it is that you know where your main trunk line or your spine route is, and you'll be able to turn up at any time and there'll be a bus within 15 minutes. So that's what a rapid route delivers. Our next challenge is to get that from Monday to Friday to a 7-day-a-week timetable, so you can do it on the weekend as well. So now we're doing that with the blue rapid, the red rapid. We're introducing the green and the black in October, and we've got a number more rolling out over the next few years. We're going to have another network change in March, and that'll really be giving the network a whole trial in the lead up to the start of light rail, and so that when light rail starts operating, we're not trying out a new network on day one. So you can expect to see for that March change quite a lot of community engagement and consultation with people around changes to the network and how we might actually roll out all the new rapid services which service the entire city, and that particular map of the entire rapid network over the next 4 years is also available online. Services to new suburbs. In the network change in October, Molonglo Valley hasn't had very good public transport at all over the last few years, but last year we introduced some new services into the new suburbs in the Molonglo Valley. In October we'll add Denman Prospect to that. So that's been the focus of a new suburb rollout into Denman Prospect. I'm really conscious, in particular with Jacka and Moncrief, as well as getting those services up and running. So that's the piece of work that we will do in the lead up to March to figure out how best we can get new services into Moncrief and Jacka. So that's that on the buses. The second question that Peter asked me to address was the Franklin Early Childhood School. So for those who don't know, Franklin has a school, but it is an early childhood school, which means that it's actually got a childcare centre and a preschool to year 2 school. So it's not your traditional preschool to year 6 primary school. It's one of a number of early childhood schools right across the territory, so it has a slightly different focus in its education that a standard P to 6 school would have. I had a lot to do with the Franklin school community over the last couple of years, and Franklin's growing, Gungahllin's growing. There's investment in every single school in Gungahlin being rolled out at the moment, and the Franklin community was really keen to see their school expanded, but there's mixed views within the Franklin community and within the broader Gungahlin region about whether Gungahlin region still has an early childhood school. So or whether Franklin becomes no longer an early childhood school, or whether it becomes your more traditional preschool to year 6 school. So Labor made that commitment during the last election, but we said we didn't have a firm view on how it should be expanded, either a larger early childhood school or it become a P to 6 school. In the intervening period as well, we also made a commitment to an early childhood strategy, which the ACT's never had. And Yvette Berry, who's the Education Minister, is currently working on that strategy. So until we get that nailed down, we won't be able to be in a position to start talking more broadly to the community about in which way the Franklin Early Childhood School will be expanded, but it's still very firmly a commitment that Labor has to deliver that over the next couple of years. The next one was about the nurse walk-in centre. So who's ever used a nurse walk-in centre? Who's never heard of a nurse walk-in centre? Oh, okay, well, great. Well, I'd encourage you. So we currently have 2. They are located in the Belconnen Town Centre at the Belconnen Community Health Centre, and in Tuggeranong with the Tuggeranong Community Health Centre. They're open every day of the week from 7:30am to 10pm. You walk in and you can be seen by a nurse, and the average waiting time is less than half an hour. They have senior nurses practicing there, and you can go and drop in for a whole range of different reasons. They are particularly important for after hours care, both in the morning and in the evening, as well as over the weekends as well. And so last year during the election campaign, Labor made a commitment to expand the network of nurse walk-in centres, and we have funded the early works for all of those, and they are in Gungahlin, the Western Creek, Molonglo, Woden region, and the inner north as well. So, but the first one we're going to get underway and build is the one here in Gungahlin, which is terrific. That was funded in this year's budget, and we expect it to be up and running sort of probably just in the second half of next year. So that the budget's there, the funding's gotten underway. Now, one of the things about the nurse walk-in centres is that people love them, nurses love them, but they're a bit harder for GPs to love. And so there's always been a bit of a conversation with GPs about how we best integrate nurse walk-in centres with GP clinics. And in this wonderful federation that we have, all GP funding is delivered through the Commonwealth. And the states and territories are funded by the Commonwealth effectively to run hospitals and to sort of deliver outpatient services through hospitals. So if you were to design a health system from scratch, I don't think you'd design it that way. But what we're doing in the context of building the Gungahlin Walk-in Centre, because we know there's actually quite a lot of GPs here in the Gungahlin region. I remember when I first moved here 10 years ago, it was virtually impossible. We stuck with our old GP where we used to live in the inner north, and it took us quite a while to get into a good practice here. But actually we've seen now lots of GP clinics open right across the region, and particularly in the town centre. So I wouldn't mind, does everyone here have a GP in Gungahlin if you live here? And do you find them pretty easy to get into?
Nope. No. We had that challenge last week where we can get our son in to see GP that day, and that was within your name probably done it like we did 3 different centres and checking online during the night for that day.
Okay.
We went to like waiting list for all 3 centres, got nothing.
Couldn't get in.
And the only way we could get for him to see a doctor is use the 136.
Yeah, okay. Yep. Yeah. So it wasn't sort of a walk-in centre type of thing that you could have done?
Oh, yeah, like the walk-in centre was here, which we've been asking for many years.
Yes. There's one in Belconnen. In the meantime, there's one in Belconnen until the one here opens.
There's a doctor's place above in where Coles is, or where Fernwood is.
Yeah,
There's one in there. I walked in with my daughter last week.
Yeah.
Got in there, 20 minutes, saw the doctor.
Yeah. It's really, I'm finding as a health minister now almost, it's actually, people's experiences are quite diverse and different. But so the this, and the vast majority of GP practices are small businesses, and the vast majority of GPs work long hours, and they really, they want to see more patients. Most of them aren't open on the weekend. So I've been talking to GP groups for a while now about how the walk-in clinic here can better integrate with the nurse walk-in centre. And we had a forum with them run by the Capital Health Network, which is sort of the midpoint between Commonwealth-funded organisation that sort of commissions services that are in some ways the interface between our sort of hospital setting and our GPs. And they helped us to facilitate that workshop. So there were some really good ideas came out of that. For example, we could, for this nurse walk-in clinic, look at having a fracture clinic. And that would be something a lot of the nurses can do that the GPs would value. We also talked about one of the things that I'm really keen on and really focusing on in the health portfolio is prevention. And one of the things we talked to the GPs about is what role could the nurse walk-in clinics play in terms of prevention. And one of the things that we will explore is pre-screening for diabetes. So happy to talk more about this because it's really important that some of the challenges of sort of chronic diseases that we see coming for people in our community are really quite profound. There's some things that we can actually prevent through a number of different ways, but one really effective thing to do is to get a particular blood test that can measure your blood sugar levels over the previous 90 days, and it can give you an indication of whether you might be pre-diabetic or even diabetic. So there's been a couple of recent trials through Diabetes ACT and other organisations around the country where they will pre-screen people for pre-diabetes and find up to 25 or 30% of people are pre-diabetic, and there are some really simple things that you can do to prevent yourself actually getting particularly type 2 diabetes. So that is a role that the nurse walk-in clinics could play. They are staffed by really senior nurses. They're free, they're really accessible, there's really low waiting times, they're available after hours, they're available on the weekends. So rather than sort of being in battle with the GPs about walk-in nurses versus doctors, I'm really keen to see a way that the Gungahlin Clinic could trial a new model and trial a couple of new things and see what we can do there. So you can expect to see some more information about that over the next few months and into the beginning of next year, and where it's actually going to be located. So the Community Health Centre, which is on Ernest Kavanagh Street in the town centre, as you walk in there, who's ever used the Gungahlin Community Health Centre? Yeah, good, okay. Yeah, who hasn't used it? Most people, I think. Yeah, so what you'll find there is if you walk into it, it will actually be built at the front of the Community Health Centre, so it will be able to be open those extended hours without impacting on the operations and the rest of the health centre as well. No, it's actually, they don't need a very large space because there's really only about 4 treatment rooms and a waiting room as well. So, and sort of some back office stuff. So they don't need a very large space, which is what's great about them. So, and after the Gungahlin one, now we've got sort of the design work and finding a location for the Western Creek one. Because there isn't an existing community health facility in Western Creek or Molonglo Valley. And then the third one that will roll out will be in the inner north. And for those who've ever used the City Health Centre, which is on the corner of, which is on Moore Street, that building is being sold. So the City Health Centre needs to move, and we need to build an inner north walk-in centre. So we're looking at combining those ones as well. And then finally, Peter asked me to talk about Mirabai Drive, and I think that's probably where I can get people to have a look at this particular pamphlet, which actually doesn't just have Mirabai Drive on it, but has all the information about all those roadworks, which everyone has to effectively battle with. If you pulled it up online, actually, yeah, we could find it. So what we've tried to do with this is to give people a sense of all of those projects that are underway, because there is an awful lot of them, to give you a sense of which ones are underway, when they're finishing, and which ones are about to start. So, and we've had Transport Canberra and City Services have had a couple of sort of pop-up sessions in Gungahlin Town Centre. I was at one of the ones last Thursday, just to give people an indication of this map and explain some of the detail in it as well. And it's sort of relevant to the presentation earlier about the developments, the pod development up near Gundaroo Drive, that there's a lot of work going on around Gundaroo Drive, obviously, but in this year's budget, we also funded that roundabout, which is there on the corner of Mirabai, Anthony Rolfe and Gundaroo Drive. That's going to be turned into a traditional signalised intersection. And what that is, to me, vital and really important. But what else we're doing as part of that project is also adding another lane southbound from the sort of the lower Paulco Crescent, so the first Paulco Crescent if you're going over Mirabai Drive, down Mirabai Drive to Anthony Rolfe. So really, yeah, on the bridge. So you see, yeah, over the bridge. So there's road reserve there, and I think you'll already see that work underway. That's another lane. Yeah, that's another lane of traffic. So that's really important because the traffic flows there are mostly southbound traffic flows, and it gets really clogged up in the mornings. And so, yep, and the other really important part of that is that there's now good pedestrian access for that intersection. There's just been awful pedestrian access for that intersection for an extremely long time. It was one of the first things I ever raised as a neighbour of that intersection at a Gungahlin Community Council meeting about 6 years ago, and it's taken a while, but that work's being done. Oh, it's terrible because it's the main access point to Yerrabee Pond, and it's the main access point from all of these developments over to Yerrabee Pond as well. Because
promoting that,
yep,
and the huge dollars that developers have paid for the lease variation charges on those sites. Is there an option of taking some of that money that those developers have paid to put in some better infrastructure, like a pedestrian bridge, across there from say the development space and then the town centre to Yerrabee?
Yeah, I'm not sure about a pedestrian bridge because there's sort of very mixed views about pedestrian bridges, but I think a good signalised intersection where there's good safe access. But I think, I don't know who raised the point earlier, but around the planning changes that are happening, particularly in that one little precinct, I'd be really keen to see where there's sort of public realm improvement, and it came through in the planning refresh that people want to see better active travel from that particular precinct into the town centre, where there is opportunities to all co-invest. So we all pile in a little bit of money, and by us I mean the community through the government, and the various developers might be able to pile in a little bit of money, and we'll be able to get a lot more bang for our buck out of what might be public infrastructure, both on the town centre side and the Yerriby Pond side. So I'll be keen to really explore that through the town centre planning refresh, and I think if everyone is able to contribute, and I think it's something that's come up a lot in the community council, is if everyone, yeah. I mean, I've seen all of these developments come through here over many years, and there has been a real commitment to coming here. I mean, this is the only community council that I'm really familiar with where not only the consultants but the actual developers, the actual builders come here really regularly and talk to people in the community about what they're doing and really do engage. So Christy,
GCC is the only pro-development.
Well, that's probably right. Well, Sensible Sustainable Development Community Council. So, I mean, Christy Jorgensen made that point before that there has been a commitment, and I mean, I've been coming here for a long time, and they're very regular. They're very regular, as are the marketplace, up in the town centre as well, coming and being really regular attendees at the community council meetings.
I can't find this online.
Okay.
The URL on the back doesn't exist.
TC. Oh gosh. Oh god. It's transport.act.gov.au. Oh my god, that's terrible. Oh my god. But it's not one that should be. If you look up transport.act.gov.au, you should see that there. Oh my gosh.
All right. So did you
Sorry about that.
Got any more remarks, Megan?
So the Mirabai Drive one, I just wanted to mention because I think it's been we've promoted it for a while, but it seems to have not quite got through to people. But obviously with the work underway, the other work underway you'll see on the map, it's extensive between the town centre, light rail, Gundaroo Drive, Horse Park Drive. There's a lot of projects underway as well. So I'm happy to talk about all of those things and or more if people have particular questions.
Any questions? Yeah.
On the old bandwagon.
Oh yeah.
So the extension or the duplication up to Federal Highway.
Yep. That's next.
I thought you might have made a comment earlier
Yep.
in the year that that segment was going to be commenced at the same time as the other area.
No.
But obviously by the literature,
Yep.
it's not going to be commenced until or completed until 2019.
Yep. So, sorry.
So that's the very last section, which with all the other sections duplicated is going to be the bottleneck. So notwithstanding vehicle traffic, jumping on the active travel
bike path there,
which will help reduce diabetes anyway.
Yep, you're right. And our climate change emissions as well. So that's
cyclists at the moment.
Yeah, I know.
Jump on that road to tackle that hill. So now by the time that project's complete, it's going to be another 2 years or more away. Would there be scope in the big bucket ACT to look at providing some sort of a temporary wire path access along that road, because once that's opened up, the lead on to the Majura Park cycle lane is essentially going to be a cyclist highway.
Oh yeah, it's going to be great.
Route into the city.
Yep.
At the moment, I try and provide feedback to Canberra Metro and Pedal Power and the like on the Flemington Road access, and that's lethal as well. A number of times that with all the changes, so it dissuades cyclists from going along there as well. So having something that takes you away and leads onto the pathway will give active travel, I think, a really big boost. Takes you away from the hassle of going through high traffic areas into the city. But we were going to rely on the integrated cycle path with that development, but that's 2 years away. So I'm just wondering what can be done.
I'd love to say yes, but there are some reasons why it's going to be really hard. And part of the Horse Park Drive that we're talking about, at the moment, Wells Station Drive to Anthony Rolfe Drive has been duplicated, and then we've funded, the work is well underway on the other two parts of it. So the reason that there's been a focus on the northern end first is because it was the easier one to design. And the Directorate's advice to me was they wanted to break that. That's a 60, so the bit in the middle, forgive me, I've forgotten the Wells Station to Anthony Rolfe, how much that costs, but the remainder is a $60 million project. Their advice to me was that it was going to actually be potentially difficult to get a local firm to deliver a $60 million upgrade given everything else that's sort of going on at the market. So their advice was break it up into 2 contracts. And we want to get it rolled out the door as quickly as possible. The easiest one to design, because there's less technical challenges going up and around the bend as you get up onto the close to the Majura Parkway, is the Anthony Rolfe to Mulligan's Flat end. So that's why that one's being done first. It's not entirely, self-explanatory, but so the other reason for not being able to do that, the rest of that job, is that effectively in building a better cycle path there, it's just such a major job and such a difficult terrain that I totally understand your point. It's a bit of a shocker for cyclists.
Yeah.
So
I understand that.
Yeah.
The long-term approach, you do want to have it done
Yeah.
properly.
Yeah.
I'm simply suggesting that as a temporary fix,
Yeah.
could you simply add another metre to the verge?
It would be one we'd have to slow down all the traffic even more just to actually build it. It'd have to be built to certain standards because we just couldn't build a cycle path to a less than ideal standard. I mean, the one that's been really interesting for me is the one along Flemington Road at the moment, just past the tip where it goes up and over. That's only a temporary path, and I'm still talking to Canberra Metro and Transport Canberra about that because I've ridden that. Seems pretty good to me, but it's not. It's much better than being on road, but it is not of a permanent standard for a cycle path. So all of those things have been factored, and I've really been pushing them on that particular cycle path, what happens once light rail starts operating, and also on the Horse Park Drive. But I'm sorry, it will be a bit of a wait for the rest of that.
Okay. Yep, just here.
Yep.
Oh, no, just quickly, while we're on Majura, is there a regular sweeping schedule or something? Or
Yeah. Of the cycle path or the road itself?
The road itself, because I use the
on-road.
I use the I suppose what do you call it, the shoulder of
The on-road cycle path, yeah.
The on-road cycle path, and there's a fair bit of especially where the bridge to the AFB goes. I've already had a couple of flats there, but anyway.
Oh, okay. I'll pass that on. Yeah. Yep. Thanks.
I need to jump in with Q&A before you answered the question about Mirabai. I know that.
Yep.
Mirabai Drive.
Yes.
It appears that the Mirabai Drive over the dam something is happening.
That's what I just talked about. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, that's
I just missed it when I was playing with the computer.
Yep.
Someone else
All
has a
good.
question, I hope.
Yep.
I'm not on Gungahlin specifically.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
I'm interested in your role around mental health.
Yep.
Unfortunately, I've had too much experience recently with the mental health unit at the Canberra Hospital.
Okay.
They're unfortunately unable to provide long-term care for people suffering those illnesses. And I'm wondering what is in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to have better long-term care for our mentally ill people?
Yeah. So Shane Rattenbury is the Mental Health Minister, and that was a decision that the Chief Minister took after the election to have a separate Mental Health Minister, and Shane is working really hard at establishing an Office of Mental Health, and he's been speaking about it over the last week in particular because the model for what an Office of Mental Health could look like, there are lots of options to choose from, so he's currently working through what the best model for an Office of Mental Health is. I know he's really interested, and I'm happy to talk to you about the specific experience of what it might be that might be the actual barrier to getting long-term mental health care services. We now have a new secure mental health unit, which was built and opened last year, the year before, last year, and so that has meant that people who need to be in a secure mental health facility for usually a longer period of time now have a separate and secure facility that's purpose built for very acute cases. That means is actually being able to be freed up from the adult mental health unit at Canberra Hospital, some further capacity for them to deal with patients there, and not to have some of the more challenging patients that need to be in a secure mental health facility. One of the commitments that Labor made in the last election, which we've again funded in this year's budget, is to have a child and adolescent inpatient mental health facility at the Centenary Hospital. That's not something that Canberra's ever had before, so inpatient settings for children and adolescents have tended to be offered only in a very short time frame within the existing paediatric wards, or people need to go to Sydney for treatment. So in terms of long term, maybe I'll have a chat to you about, is long term 2 weeks, or is it 2 months, or is it even longer? Yeah.
The availability of services for more than a few hours is
Oh, there's some quite long. So maybe I'll have a talk to you about that. But yeah, okay.
The individual I'm talking about was released
Okay.
before I think they were back in work.
Oh, okay, so that might be, yeah. And so one of the things that there's a lot of mental health services offered in the community, offered by community service providers. One really important thing that will happen next year is the University of Canberra Public Hospital will open. So I don't know if any of you have, there was an open day a couple of weeks ago on the UC site, and people were able to take tours of the public hospital. It's unbelievable. It's an incredible new hospital, and that will open midway through next year. That has quite a dedicated mental health facility, and what that might mean is that can become another version of sort of a step down facility. So you have sort of like the most serious hospital at Canberra Hospital, and what the UC Public Hospital will provide is where you might need to be in a hospital for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, rather than spending all those 2 or 3 weeks potentially at Canberra Hospital, your rehabilitation, and that could be mental health rehabilitation, will be able to be delivered at UCPH, and it's sort of purpose-built, it's dedicated, it has quite a different focus on its rehabilitation services as a more acute hospital at Canberra Hospital will have. That'll be another huge change in the delivery of mental health, so in a sense you could have step down from an acute setting in the Canberra Hospital to UCPH, and then back into your own home, and you might get sort of outreach services from different community health organisations. So I'll have to talk to you after about the specifics. Darren?
I think you're talking about the fracture clinic in National recently. When I was at the Canberra Hospital, I found that the fracture clinic was good, but the physio department was very small. Can't really handle much.
Okay.
What's going on? And the only thing that could really give you was like community-based sort of places that you could go to that have really high rating lists.
Okay.
I just told them that I was thinking about it.
Okay. Did that work?
I didn't want to forget.
What did they say?
What I really want to talk about was in the centre of Gungahlin, obviously in Hiddleston Street, towards the top there. There's definitely, there's a lot of work and and all of the work going on there, but not much is really going on where they've got big barriers up. And I've seen that for a while. So the barriers.
Oh yes, I've seen some comments from you on that. Yeah.
Between those two spaces, and even the people that I'm associated with the public transport groups and so forth. I mean, I'm for light rail, but I'm kind of torn as well, because I think that not a lot has been going on in that area, like the hoarding or whatever they call it has gone up. But nothing much has really gone on there for months, and it seems like they might have put that hoarding up a little bit too early, because really, to have that level of sort of barriers for customers and things like that, and to not actually be doing anything on site, just seems like it's affecting a lot of the shopkeepers in that area.
A lot of foot traffic.
I know, yeah. Oh, look, I'm very conscious of that, yeah.
Like rail, but at the same time, I think, you can't just go into businesses and put this massive big walls up and then just nothing to happen for months.
Yeah. So with that, Darren's talking about the top end of Hibbison Street, basically outside Gungahlin Village and the oldie block. There was some underground works which needed to be done, and a lot of work's being done on the intersection. The businesses were pretty extensively, we had lots of conversations with them, and I personally had conversations with quite a lot of them, last year as well. There is some ongoing work about promoting those businesses because, I've walked down there, it's, it's pretty dingy, especially over winter. It was pretty pitiful. But you would have seen changes to the signage. There's been lots of changes. There's been about 3 or 4 iterations of the signage to make sure that people know that the businesses are still open. There's a lot of social media and online activity around encouraging people to go and use those businesses and make sure that they know that they're still open as well. I mean, the other impact on those businesses at the intervening period, these guys have spent $70 million and opened a Kmart and upgraded their supermarket and opened heaps of new retail as well. So I think that's had an impact on the town centre. But yep.
So much is happening online.
Yep. It is a very big and complex project, and being able to, they have really sort of planned it out well. That will come down in December, so you can expect to see a lot of work underway there really soon. It's about the ability of the project as a whole to get that work done, particularly on the intersection at Hinder Street and Hibbison Street. So there was not going to be any access, and there was some underground works which needed to be done. And if they'd done those works and then had to remediate it to make it acceptable for either traffic or for pedestrian movements, that would have been just another sort of an added burden on the actual project itself. So if there's more that we can do to support the businesses that are there, I'm happy to have a look at it.
Yeah, a related question though, in a more general sense, how's the light rail going against the project? Their project plan? Are they on track? Likely to be behind schedule? Ahead of schedule? How are we going?
Oh, look, good. Thanks for the question. It is really good. I think this next 12 months is really, really challenging part of the schedule, though. So obviously, it's really, a lot of the project's really visible, but a lot of it's not as visible as you might think. I mean, the Mitchell depot is looking terrific, and it's really, literally coming out of the ground. And what's important about that is getting the tracks laid into the depot, because those light rail vehicles are being manufactured now, and they are scheduled to arrive in Canberra in November. And when they arrive in Canberra, they'll have to go onto the rails and actually roll into the Mitchell depot. So you'll sort of see those before the end of the year, and then early next year you're going to start to see them trying to test the vehicles in and out of the depot and onto Flemington Road. So you'll start to see that from early next year. One really big thing that you won't see, which is a really complex project, is integrating the light rail signals with the traffic signals. That's actually a very, very important part of the project, and that work's all underway at the moment. That's one of the ones you don't see, and that work's underway. So, it's huge, and I know it's sort of has a bit of an impact, but my experience of it is they're managing that sort of impact pretty well. Starting to recruit light rail drivers, those sorts of things. So,
I guess one of the problems that we're going to have is summer nats is happening in that area, and it's going to be a mess unless we get it quite
So we've been talking to they've been talking to summer nats from last year, and knowing that this year's going to be real. I mean, we had the Kanga Cup had a bit of an impact on Kanga Cup, but those discussions are well advanced, and they've already had them for last year's summer nats anyway, because the car park, part of the car park was closed down then. But yeah, I think they're very aware of that.
You talked about you said you were talking about to a lot of businesses with that little bit in Gungahlin Centre. Will you be doing the same for the people in Mitchell? The businesses in Mitchell? Because there's stuff in the papers last week about all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and I'm meeting with them. They've now formed a sort of quite an organised group, and I'm meeting with them on Friday. Yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, that's exactly the sort of thing we need to ramp up, I think, in Mitchell. Yep.
Megan, in regards to the stage 2 of the light rail.
Yep. Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah.
I recently started a job at Parliament House, which is all nice.
Yeah.
I know that there's discussions going on about where that route goes
Mm-hmm.
and the like, but I just wanted to give you a heads up that Parliament House has its 30th anniversary next year.
Oh, okay.
And there's quite a lot of infrastructure work going on at Parliament House. for
Yeah.
reasons.
Big fence.
Yeah, well, yeah. There's more stuff to come next year.
Yeah, okay.
The reason I'm raising
Yep.
it is just depending on which choice you guys make
Yeah.
for that second route,
Mm-hmm.
you might want to get in touch with them and say, hey, if we're coming through and you're moving machines and stuff around at the same
Okay,
time,
thank you.
could the two governments work together?
Thank you. Well, NCA, the National Capital Authority, were really important on stage 1, and they have overriding works approval over our DAs on stuff along the main part of the corridor, but they are totally essential for stage 2 as well, including the requirement to run wire-free through the parliamentary zone, which is pretty significant. So I get those routes. There's been quite a lot of community consultation. There's quite a lot of work going on stage 2. We're quite well advanced in terms of the routes that we are looking at. And just very quickly, there were 2 options. Really, both options went west around city centre, so west around London Circuit. 2 options then went through the parliamentary zone up high along State Circle or in through Parks and Barton. When we did community engagement, stakeholder engagement, overwhelmingly Parks and Barton was the preference for most individuals and most stakeholder groups as well. Yeah, yeah.
I'd just like to jump on the active travel.
Yeah, yep, yep.
Not sure whether you would have seen the design or would expect you probably have.
Of the stops? Yep. No?
Cycle parking on a light rail route.
Yeah, yep.
So it's actually on board.
Yep.
So we've done a review with Canberra Metro.
Yeah.
And provided some feedback. But it's going to create some challenges because it's on board.
Yep.
And it's not particularly segmented away.
Yeah.
The light rail vehicles will be heavily used by
yep.
Foot traffic, as you'd expect.
Mm.
So in those peak times, you're going to find it quite difficult to get a bicycle on unless you're first on the train squeezing in.
Yeah.
So if you're going to come along halfway along the route, you're likely not to be able to get a cycle on. So it's a bit of a disincentive for cyclists there compared to the current 200 series buses, which you can just put them on the front of the bus.
Well, you can only put 2 on.
You can put 2 on.
Yeah.
Light rail has. But there's no
yep.
There's no
yep.
blockage of access to putting them on the front of the bus.
Yeah.
Would it be, because you're going to remove all the buses, I guess.
Yep.
So is there any facility for having potentially some bus service with the light rail service that may provide some relief in those peak times?
No, in terms of the bus services. I mean, your question goes to, will there be so many people using light rail that it'll be chock-a-block? And look, if that happens, I'll have sort of a political argument about that, but I'll be pretty happy to see that. But you'll get more bikes onto a light rail vehicle than you will on a bus, because you can only take 2 and you can't actually roll one on. There won't be any restrictions to you. So there'll be I think there's 6 in each vehicle, 6 where you can actually hang up your bike. And then there'll also be, you can just wheel on your bike as well. So you don't have to have it actually slung up on the actual bike holders in the carriage, in the vehicle itself.
Right, okay, so there are designated bike parks on the vehicle?
Yeah, yep.
You're not restricted to those?
No.
Right.
No.
Okay, that wasn't actually brought up.
Oh, right. Certainly not my understanding, because there's, we've talked about it a bit, because I know there's some rail operators, like I happen to know Wellington is looking, they are having huge issues with the number of people having bikes on their heavy rail, and they only have heavy rail, but on heavy rail. So, but I'll have a look at that. Certainly not my understanding you'll be able to wheel your bike on.
It's on video, so
well, that's what I mean. Yeah. There's a video of people wheeling their bike in. You'll get more bikes on light rail than you ever will on a bus.
I am conscious of time. I definitely don't want to go much more, few more minutes. We're well over.
It's just about this question.
Okay.
I think the ACT light rail service was different than most light rails. I think it was one of the first ones to introduce that.
We designed it.
You could walk on
Yep.
the bike. So,
Yep.
and you would have more services more regularly with the light rail than what you would with the bus.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't
Yeah. 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 Thanks.
I'm going to ask a question. Is the stage 3 going to be extending the light rail deeper into Gungahlin?
No, it's not on the network plan.
And
No.
could a group of developers band together and say, can we build one more stop at Infinity Towers or something?
Sure. Well, that was the original proposal for light rail in the 1980s from Village Building Company.
Yeah, I still have the brochure.
Yeah, I know.
The tram on the front.
Yeah.
All they had to do was get the contract for nothing. To do the development.
Yeah. Deal.
Sorry, any other questions? Last call. Andrew?
Just talking about light rail becoming operational in 2018, is there going to be any looking into basically cycle paths into
Yes.
the Gungahlin Centre to match up with it?
Yes.
Because they all magically stop about 200 metres from the
I
town
know.
centre.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. That's the one about the precinct up here, about getting that better connected to the town centre, particularly because there's so many people. I'm very conscious of that. You'll start to see that around Gungahlin East. So I know there's a really frustrating one at the extension of the Valley Avenue into the town centre, and there's a sort of trade-off between when blocks are being developed and when you build the infrastructure so you don't have to rip it up within a couple of months. But I'm really conscious of those missing links where they link to shopping centres in particular. So yes, there's quite a lot of work going on about that. The other one is that people might know is Wells Station Drive along Franklin on the northern end. There's no there's no path on that side, so we're actually that work should get underway fairly soon to link a path from Franklin onto Flemington Road.
Right. I think I'll call a stop tonight. Thank you very much, Megan, for coming along tonight and addressing those issues. It's very much appreciated. I think it's been a great meeting. It's really good turnout. I'm really excited by that. Thank you very much for coming along. Next month, I know you're excited by this. It's the annual general meeting. We're meant to be excited. So we'll have an AGM prior to the normal public meeting. As usual, if there are any particular topics you want us to take on or seek speakers for, then I hope you know where to find us. Thank you again for your attendance tonight, and we'll see you next month.